Konstantin.
Kostya. Kostya Bazelyuk. Konstantin Bazelyuk in English.
Welcome to It Is Here podcast. Hey, I appreciate you coming here, man. Today you're just gonna talk to me about your life story. Thank you for being so open and willing to share. I know it's not a easy life you lived so far. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, I can. There are some parts that are pretty much deep and heavy, but they're very impactful. They changed the course of my history. What it could have been and what is right now, those things are going to be very hard to talk about or listen to, but I'm here to share as much as I can because it makes a whole difference to explain somebody else that even though there are hardships or times where something will happen, there is also ups to those downs. Okay.
Can you hear me pretty good?
Yeah, perfectly.
All right, let's go on.
So, one of my things is it's pretty much a testimony of struggles and successes. My life story doesn't begin in an easy place in the world. Back in 1990, it starts off where the end of communism officially ended in Moldova and Ukraine. Officially, of course, with quotations. It didn't really end until about 1998. But that meant people who were taking care of me throughout their years, they were some really tough people. My grandfather was a well digger. He was the one who was responsible for taking care of my family. When he was young, and this I mentioned my grandfather for a real clear reason. He's a major influential figure to my life. He's the one who took care of me. He's the one who, and my grandmother, the ones who raised me, not my parents. But my life started in 1990, February 8th. I was born in Moldova. I am the oddball out of my family, though. I love to tell that one. I have three brothers. They're each individuals of strong character. Soroja or Sergey, Pavlik or Paul, Igor, well, as Igor. They don't change. So, and my name is Kostya Ivanovich Bazelyuk. A real mouthful to say it in Russian. And
I'm not even gonna try. Well, I could probably pronounce it, but I'm not gonna try it.
you could do a better job than I can these days.
Kostya Ivanovich Bazelyuk.
See? Much better. I still have the English. You have the full power of the native tongue. So, I did a little more digging into my life story than most people. I wanted to know what exactly set up my life exactly the way it did and why did things happen the way it did. Mainly because it influenced the people who were raising me at the time. It influenced the way they behaved. They even changed their attitudes in life. And also because Ukraine and Moldova and Russia are a whole nother world and another beast that I cannot explain now. These days, it's much easier to live. Back then, you had to do what you had to do, and then some. It wasn't just some struggle or survival. Communism took everything from the people. When it got close to that time, all the people who had wealth, the government came and took it away, and it shared it with the people however they felt like. If the lights were out that week and you still paid the bills, it's just because the government wanted to. We don't really have an explanation. But that was life. And my parents were farmers. So they were living on farmland, raising cattle, sheep, all kinds of animals, and even out in the pastures or the cornfields every season. And that meant my brothers were at 5, 6, or 7, or were out there as extra hands, keeping the family full at the end of winter. Winter isn't that easy down there. You don't go in your fridge like you do now. You have to go in the cellar, and the cellar takes years to prepare. You got to dig it out, and you also have to rely on your family, not just your parents, your mama and papa who can, like today, they get a job, you're full. It takes a whole clan. It took my grandparents. It took my other grandparents. One set was Christian, one set was Jewish, to raise the family. I know this. And it's a big deal. But it's also what makes people be able to come together. That work, that lifestyle itself was the major backdraft of the start of my life. When I was young, I was a very loved kid. People were always thinking I was cute and adorable. I was a little smart guy. But when it comes to it, I was able to understand at a very young age that things weren't given to me for free, that people were did it even though they were hard times, even though they had to sometimes walk for 10 miles to get to a place, to get their little grocery stores or to a bazaar. That's a long story to get there. But as you get up at sunrise, and you can just get there about 12 o'clock if you're lucky. They weren't slow walkers, though. Even the babushkas were real fast. I couldn't keep up with them at first when I was growing up. So I always, as a child, I always had to be carried. My brothers and my family didn't want to do that. So I literally, when I was really young, I had to learn to kind of take care of myself in a certain way. It wasn't so much coddling as we get now, which, to be fair, I think it's a deserved change. Life isn't as hard. You don't need to struggle as hard in some ways. But down to earth, that was the kind of people they were. Literally, they were digging the earth. So, my father himself, he joined the military because everyone joins for 2 years. And his father joined the military for 2 years because it's a custom service. Here in the United States, you can volunteer, and they only take the elite, more or less, the best or the best grades you can get. Yeah, unless you're a Marine, you can join at a score of 30. I'm just kidding. Regardless, you still have to tough out as a Marine in the United States. So, thank you for serving. But here, when I'm talking about my father's life, I'm talking about it because it sets the real backdraft and changes of my entire life. Without my father doing the things he did, it wouldn't have set the same story, same life that you would figure an ordinary child would have. I don't think I'll ever call myself ordinary. I don't even think I'll call myself unusual or weird. I would say extraordinary. And not because I think so. It's because I've been told so. Over and over when I explain the little bits and pieces. The country of Moldova is a very small land. It's got not much to go. Back then, they were just barely building a train station. And that's a big deal for that place. That meant they were going to be rich, eventually. But 20 years later, 30 years later, they're still struggling. They only have the things that they make with their hands, and that's it. Money isn't really a commodity, but they still make by. They still get by, and things are changing, so it'll be easier. Finally, you can get a taxi ride from the countryside to the city. Now, that's a big difference, having walking from 10 miles from the farm to the bazaar itself. I remember that. That's a big deal in our culture because the bazaar itself still sets what we cook to this day as a community of Slavics. Isn't that right?
Mm. Just depends. I think it depends.
Yeah. Well, it's a really big deal though, because borscht comes from that kind of lifestyle too. And honestly, I miss it. It is the best thing I could imagine. Having to be able to go in the garden, getting ingredients together, helping my grandmother put them together, helping my parents put them together. My grandmother and my mom probably knew some really old recipes from way back in the day from their parents and their grandparents. I don't really know them, but I still can appreciate the food that I ate back in the day. So that's a big noticeable. And honestly, that food, it made me a really fit kid growing up. So I'm talking about the light stuff right now. It gets a little heavier because as I took a little bit of a rabbit hole explaining about the culture, it also sets how my grandparents were involved or how my parents were involved. My father, as I said, joined the military. Before he joined, he was a man that did not drink, he did not smoke, he did not gamble. And he was having to take care of 4 kids by himself, more or less. He was traveling from Ukraine and Moldova, working. Sometimes he would drink the money away, sometimes he would probably share it. My mother, though, she was the one that was very loving. She took care of 4 sons best she could. Life wasn't easy for a struggling mother with a drunken husband, and especially in an old country where your social life isn't just on social media, it's right in your face. Your family will judge you if you do the wrong thing. Your church will judge you if you do the wrong thing. Even have one thing as being a church member in the old country like that is a very dangerous thing to be. You couldn't imagine not going to church in the United States. In fact, you probably don't even want to sometimes. But there, people will travel miles, countries, just to visit their family, just to worship in church. And that's another big point of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about my grandfather and my father. These things are what set the backdrop of how people believed they should act, their morals and their guidances. And to this day, this still makes a difference in how it's affected my morals and guidance as well. And I'm going to tell you that it's really difficult when I say it led to a really dark and deep alley. So when I was 1 or 3 years old, I was just enjoying my life as a child, sort of, taken care of. I got disciplined when they got disciplined. You got to paddle when you needed it. But otherwise, it was loved. It was different. We didn't really know what was supposed to be. I know that since my mom and dad moved around, my brothers, they couldn't stay in school very long. They traveled from different school district to another school district when they were transferred. So they didn't really get to learn everything they needed to from one area of town. But that was life for a farmer. You move where the grass is greener. You take care of plants where the water is there. You didn't always have a well to put the water in there. And you didn't always if you did, it didn't always fill up that season. And that's a big deal too. It's also a part of how you live off the land. And I'm telling you, my parents are very traditional folk. My grandparents are much more traditional too. It comes down to I was living my life at 3 or 4 years old, and I only find us years later. But one day I'm told to pack up and go to my aunt's. What I find out years later, though, to explain this deep part of the story, is simple, and not very simple at all. It's a very big tragedy. It set off the entire direct history. If I could have imagined me living a life in that country to this day, that event should have never happened. But because my father joined the military, because he was influenced by his friends who also drank, who also smoked, who acted out of ill judgments, it also set off arguments with my mom and dad one night. I know I was told that they were arguing one night, and the next day she was in the hospital. I can only imagine what happened, but the gossip has been stirring around my community for years. For so long, I can't even really define the truth. But what I do know from it is that my mom died, and there are two different routes that could have happened. One, one of those arguments when my mom was drinking because she was having a hard time. She couldn't really handle having to take care of four sons like that. It wasn't really that something you can do, especially when you're a poor family out in the wilds like that. Not really wilds, out in the country that way. She couldn't really do much, and luckily I'm an innocent kid, so I managed to get through it. But what ended up happening is my father got accused of murder. And of course, the judge of the town pretty much lets him go. He does not go to jail, but these are the two options. She probably committed suicide or she was killed by my father. It's not an easy thing to say, even to this day. It's not easy to say that, and I'm gonna repeat, there's not a way I can convey a complete emotional connection to this. And that's why I say it's not easy. That's just an expression, not that fact that it is hard or challenging. It's just something that deep really reminds me of the people I really long for. Something that I can't take back or tell to many people very often. And if it does, it takes a long time and explains much more than just who I am or what my life story is. It involves a direct web of lives. And that's what I mean. If my father hadn't joined the military, he would have probably married my mom. I don't know what he saw in her, but I'm pretty sure he loved her and loved to have 4 kids with her. So that afterwards, at 3 or 4 years old, I'm sent off without understanding why or what is going on or who to trust anymore or where my parents are. Maybe there was a funeral. I know that when you do funerals in that country, you don't have a hearse taking you all the way down the highway. You have people carrying it in caskets for all day. They're singing sorrowful songs, happy songs, Christian songs. They're singing stories about the lives of the people that they loved and lost. And I'm pretty sure that my grandparents were there too. I only remember this because there was another time in my life that my grandparents took us as a family, as a tribe, essentially, to walk this kind of rite, funeral rite, all the way to I don't know where, but it never stopped. These people never got tired, and my mother, I'm sure that's how they sent her off as goodbye. But me, myself, I was sent off with my brother to my aunt. She's okay. She's alive. She's a beautiful person today. I try to keep in touch with her every couple of years. But it's a little different because I only speak English and a little Spanish now. It's not по-русски anymore. So, and I really miss it. I'm gonna fix that one day. It's just another side to me that I can express and laugh with. But while I'm talking about the sad stuff, it is true that I was a little happy kid. So no matter where I went, I thought I was the most loved angel out there. Can you blame me?
Hey, Kostya. We're having some technical difficulties with the microphones.
I can
You
hear.
mind if we take a quick break?
Sure.
Thank you.